I stood there in the break room, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold my coffee cup. Everyone was staring at me, not with sympathy, not with understanding, with that look. You know the one. That uncomfortable, embarrassed look people get when they've just witnessed something they wish they hadn't seen. My shirt was soaked, coffee dripping down my chest, my face burning red. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was his laugh, that smug, satisfied laugh echoing through the warehouse break room like he'd just told the funniest joke in the world. Like what he'd done was nothing. Like I was nothing. I could feel something building inside me, something I'd been pushing down for months, years maybe. That tight knot in your chest that gets heavier every single day you wake up and go to a job where you're not seen as a person, where you're just something to use, something to mock, something to touch whenever he feels like it. My manager, David, was still standing there, still grinning, still waiting for me to laugh it off like I always did, like I was supposed to. But something was different this time. Something had shifted. I set down my coffee cup, my hand steady now, my breathing slow, and I looked him directly in the eyes. This was the moment everything changed. The moment I stopped being the employee who smiled through gritted teeth. The moment I stopped pretending that what was happening was normal, that it was just part of the job, that I should be grateful to even have work. But to understand why this moment mattered so much, you need to know how I got here. You need to see what had been building for so long that when it finally erupted, there was no going back. How does someone end up in a moment like this? How do you go from just trying to get through your shift to standing in a break room, soaking wet, deciding that today is the day you stop taking it? Let me take you back. Back to where this really started. Before we continue, if you've ever dealt with an annoying boss like this, subscribe to the channel. My name is Sarah. I'm 28 years old, and I work at Morrison's distribution center on the edge of town. It's one of those massive warehouse facilities where online orders get processed and shipped. The kind of place where the fluorescent lights never quite feel bright enough, where everything smells like cardboard and plastic, and where the break room coffee tastes like it was brewed 3 days ago. I've been working here for almost 4 years. 4 years of 10-hour shifts. 4 years of scanning items, packing boxes, loading pallets. 4 years of mandatory overtime during the holidays. 4 years of watching the same people come in tired and leave exhausted. It's not a bad job, really. The pay is decent enough. Better than retail. Better than the restaurant work I did before this. And my co-workers are good people. Real people who understand what it means to work hard for a living. But there's one problem. One massive, unavoidable problem that turns every single shift into an endurance test. David Morrison, the warehouse manager, the owner's nephew, 35 years old, divorced twice, and the kind of man who thinks his position gives him the right to say and do whatever he wants. David had been my direct supervisor since I started, and from day one, something felt off about him. The way he looked at female employees just a little too long. The way he'd find excuses to stand close. Too close. The way his hand would brush your shoulder when he walked past, even when there was plenty of room. At first, I told myself I was imagining it, that I was being too sensitive, that this was just how managers were. Friendly, casual. Right? Wrong. It started small. Comments about my appearance. Looking good today, Sarah. That shirt really works for you. You should wear your hair down more often. I'd force a smile. Say thanks. Keep moving. Because what else do you do? He's your boss. You need this job. You need the paycheck. You need the health insurance. So you smile. You nod. You let it slide. Then came the touches. A hand on my lower back when he'd walk behind me, his arm around my shoulders during team meetings, standing so close I could smell his cologne and feel his breath on my neck. Every single day, I'd come to work and wonder what mood he'd be in, whether today would be one of the good days where he mostly left me alone, or one of the bad days where he'd find every excuse to interact with me. The other women who worked there felt it too. Jessica from receiving, Amanda from shipping, Maria from quality control. We'd talk about it sometimes during breaks, in those whispered conversations where you're half venting and half checking to make sure no one else can hear. Did he ask you to stay late again? Yeah, just me, not anyone else. Same thing happened to me last week. What did you say? What could I say? He's the manager. And that was the thing. He was the manager. He controlled our schedules. He wrote our performance reviews. He decided who got raises and who got written up. He had all the power, and he knew it. If this feels familiar, hit the like button. The comments got worse over time. More personal, more pointed, more inappropriate. You know, Sarah, you'd make a lot more money if you were friendlier with management. I love when you bend over to pick up boxes. Best part of my day. My ex-wife never looked as good as you do in those jeans. Each comment landed like a small punch. Not enough to knock you down, but enough to keep you off balance. Enough to make you question yourself. Enough to make you feel dirty and small and angry all at the same time. I started changing how I dressed. Baggy sweatshirts instead of fitted shirts. Loose pants instead of jeans. Hair always up in a tight bun. Anything to make myself less visible, less noticeable, less of a target. But it didn't matter, because it was never really about what I wore. It was about power, about control, about him reminding me every single day that he could say and do whatever he wanted, and I couldn't do anything about it. The physical contact escalated too, his hand lingering on my shoulder during conversations, his arm casually draping across my back when he'd walk with me through the warehouse, standing so close behind me at my workstation that I could feel him there, breathing, watching. I started developing anxiety before every shift. My stomach would twist into knots as I drove to work. I'd sit in my car in the parking lot, sometimes for 10 or 15 minutes, just trying to gather the strength to walk inside. My friends noticed. My family noticed. You seem stressed lately. Is everything okay at work? You're not yourself. But what was I supposed to say? That my boss made me uncomfortable? That I felt harassed every single day? That I was terrified of losing my job if I said anything? I tried to talk to HR once, made an appointment, sat in that sterile office with the motivational posters and the fake plants. The HR representative, a middle-aged woman named Carol, listened politely, took notes, nodded sympathetically. Then she said the words that crushed any hope I had. David is the owner's nephew. He's been with the company since it started. He's never had a formal complaint before. Are you sure you're not misinterpreting friendly behavior? Am I sure? Was I sure that the sick feeling in my stomach every time he came near me was just misinterpretation? Was I sure that the way his eyes traveled up and down my body was just being friendly? I left that office feeling smaller than when I walked in, feeling like I'd done something wrong by even bringing it up, like I was the problem, not him. So I stopped talking about it, stopped hoping it would change, just focused on getting through each day, each shift, each interaction. Then came the incident with Jessica, one of the other warehouse workers, 23 years old, newly engaged, sweet girl who always had a smile on her face and brought homemade cookies for everyone's birthdays. David started paying more attention to her. The same pattern I'd seen before. The same comments, the same touches, the same predatory energy. One day, Jessica came to work in tears. Quiet tears she tried to hide. When we finally got her alone during break, she told us what happened. David had cornered her in the supply room, pressed up against her, told her that if she wanted better shifts, better hours, maybe they could work something out. His hand on her waist, his body blocking the door. She'd pushed past him and run out. Spent the rest of her shift hiding in the bathroom, trying to calm down, trying to figure out what to do. She didn't come back the next day, or the day after that. 2 weeks later, we heard she'd quit. No notice, no explanation. Just gone. And David? Nothing happened to David. He was still there, still in charge, still doing whatever he wanted. That's when I realized this wasn't going to stop. This wasn't going to get better. Not unless someone made it stop. Has something like this ever happened to you? Tell me in the comments. It was a Tuesday morning in March when everything finally came to a head. One of those cold, gray mornings where you can see your breath in the parking lot and the sky looks like it might rain at any moment. I'd been at work for maybe an hour. The morning shift was always the busiest. Trucks coming in, orders to process, the constant beeping of forklifts, and the rumble of conveyor belts, creating this industrial symphony that you eventually stop hearing. I was in the loading area, checking inventory on a delivery that had just arrived. Clipboard in hand, safety vest on, just doing my job, just trying to get through another day. Then I heard his voice behind me. "Morning, Sarah. Looking good today." I didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge him, just kept counting boxes and marking my sheet. But he didn't leave. I could feel him there, standing too close, watching. "You know, I've been thinking," he said, his voice dropping lower, more intimate. "You and I should grab drinks sometime, get to know each other better outside of work." My hand tightened on my clipboard. My jaw clenched, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm busy, David. Thanks anyway." "Come on," he said, and I felt his hand touch my arm. "Don't be like that. I'm just trying to be nice." I pulled my arm away, took a step to the side, created distance. I need to finish this inventory check. There was a moment of silence, that dangerous kind of silence where you can feel someone's mood shifting, where you can sense anger building. "You know what your problem is, Sarah?" His voice had changed. Gone was the fake friendliness. Now there was an edge, a threat. "You think you're too good for everyone here? Walking around with that attitude? Maybe if you were a little nicer, you'd get further in life." I felt my face flush, felt that familiar anger rising, but I pushed it down, swallowed it, turned back to my work. "I'm just here to do my job, David." "Yeah?" He stepped closer again, so close I could smell his coffee breath. "Well, maybe you're not doing it well enough. I've been noticing a lot of mistakes in your work lately. Might need to start writing you up." There it was, the threat underneath everything. The power he held over me. The reminder that he could make my life miserable if I didn't play along. I didn't respond, just kept counting, kept marking, kept pretending I was somewhere else. Finally, he walked away, but the knot in my chest remained. That tight, suffocating feeling that never quite goes away when you're constantly on edge. The rest of the morning passed slowly. Every time I saw him across the warehouse, my body would tense up. Every time I heard his voice, my stomach would drop. Lunch break finally came. I grabbed my food from my locker and headed to the break room, a small space with a few tables, a microwave, a refrigerator, and that terrible coffee maker that's been there since before I started working. A few other employees were already there. Mark from shipping, Linda from quality control, Tony from receiving, all of us just trying to enjoy 20 minutes of peace before going back to the floor. I was sitting at a corner table eating my sandwich, scrolling through my phone, trying to decompress. Then David walked in. He made himself a cup of coffee, added his cream and sugar, stirred it slowly. And then he turned and looked directly at me. I felt my body tense, felt that familiar dread. He walked over to my table, stood right next to me, so close I had to crane my neck to look up at him. "Sarah," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "we need to talk about your attitude problem." The room went quiet. Everyone stopped eating, stopped talking, all eyes on us. "I don't have an attitude problem," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I'm just trying to eat my lunch." "See? That right there." He gestured at me with his coffee cup. "That tone. That disrespect. You know, when I hire people, I expect a certain level of gratitude, a certain level of cooperation." My face was burning. Everyone was watching. This wasn't about work performance. This was about humiliation. This was about putting me in my place, because I'd rejected him. "I do my job," I said quietly. "I show up on time. I meet all my targets. You know what I think your problem is?" He leaned down, getting in my face. "I think you need to learn some humility. I think you need to remember that you're replaceable, that there are 100 people who'd love to have your job." Then it happened. As he was leaning over me, gesturing with his coffee cup, he accidentally tipped it. Hot coffee splashed across my chest, soaking through my shirt, burning my skin. I gasped and jumped up, the liquid scalding hot against my body. "Oh, sorry about that," David said, not sounding sorry at all. That same smug smile on his face. "Guess I'm just clumsy today." Seeth. But it wasn't an accident. Everyone in that room knew it wasn't an accident. The way he'd been holding the cup, the angle, the timing. It was deliberate. It was calculated. It was his way of showing everyone exactly how much power he had. He looked around the room at the other employees, that smile still on his face. Accidents happen, right? No one said anything. No one moved. They just looked down at their food, at their phones, at anything except what had just happened. And that's when something inside me snapped. If you like stories like this, subscribe for more. I stood there, coffee dripping down my chest, my shirt clinging to my skin. The break room was completely silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of machinery from the warehouse floor. David was still standing there, still smiling, waiting for me to apologize, waiting for me to scramble to clean up, waiting for me to do what I always did, swallow my anger, accept the humiliation, and move on. But something was different this time. Maybe it was because Jessica's face flashed through my mind, the way she'd looked when she told us what happened in the supply room, the way she'd quit rather than deal with him anymore. Maybe it was because I thought about all the other women who'd left this place, all the ones who'd simply disappeared rather than fight, all the ones who'd decided it was easier to find another job than to stand up to someone with power. Or maybe it was just that I'd finally reached my limit. That invisible line that everyone has. That point where you stop caring about consequences because staying silent feels worse than speaking up. I didn't clean myself off, didn't grab napkins, didn't run to the bathroom. Instead, I looked David directly in the eyes. My voice was calm, steady, almost eerily quiet. That wasn't an accident. His smile faltered, just for a second. What? That wasn't an accident, I repeated, louder this time. You poured that coffee on me on purpose. He laughed, that same dismissive laugh. Come on, Sarah. Don't be dramatic. I said it was an accident. No. I took a step toward him. No more pretending. No more letting you do whatever you want and act like it's nothing. That was deliberate. Just like everything else you do is deliberate. The room was frozen. No one was even pretending to look away anymore. Everyone was staring at us now, watching this unfold. I think you need to calm down, David said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone. You're being hysterical. Hysterical? I could feel my voice rising, but I didn't care anymore. You've been harassing me for 4 years. 4 years of inappropriate comments. 4 years of unwanted touching. 4 years of making me feel uncomfortable every single day I come to work. And when I don't respond the way you want, when I don't play along with your little games, you humiliate me in front of my coworkers? His face was turning red now. You need to watch what you're saying. No, I said. You need to watch what you're doing. You think because you're the manager, because you're the owner's nephew, that you can treat people like this? That you can touch us whenever you want? Say whatever you want? Pour coffee on us when we don't give you the attention you think you deserve? I'm warning you. Warn me about what? I cut him off. That you'll fire me? Good. Fire me. Write me up. Do whatever you want. Because I'm done. I'm done pretending that what you do is okay. I'm done making excuses for you. I'm done protecting your ego at the expense of my dignity. I turned to look at the other people in the room. Mark, Linda, Tony, all watching with wide eyes. He does this to all of us, I said. All the women here. The comments. The touching. The threats about our jobs if we don't cooperate. Jessica quit because of him. How many others have left because they couldn't deal with it anymore? David's face was bright red now. That's enough. You're done here. You're fired. Fine, I said. Fire me. But I'm not leaving quietly. I'm not disappearing like Jessica did, like all the others did. I pulled out my phone, started opening the camera app. What are you doing? David demanded. I'm recording this. I'm recording your response. I'm recording the coffee on my shirt that you just poured on me. I'm recording everything. And then I'm going to send it to everyone. To the owner, to corporate, to HR, to anyone who will listen. You can't do that. Watch me. I held up my phone, showing my soaked shirt, showing the coffee still dripping, showing his face, red and angry and caught. This is David Morrison, warehouse manager at Morrison's distribution center. This is what happens when you refuse his advances. This is what happens when you don't play along. This is what happens when you're just trying to do your job and be left alone. David lunged forward, trying to grab my phone, but I was faster. I stepped back, keeping it out of reach. Don't, I said. Don't make this worse than it already is. Mark stood up from his table. She's right, man. We've all seen what you do. We've all heard the comments. Linda nodded. It's not okay. It's never been okay. Tony was on his feet too. You can't just do whatever you want because you're the manager. David looked around the room, realizing for the first time that he was outnumbered, that people weren't going to stay silent anymore, that his power was slipping. You're all done, he sputtered. Every single one of you. You're all fired. You can't fire all of us, Mark said. The warehouse would shut down. And besides, I added, still holding my phone up, I'm pretty sure wrongful termination and retaliation are illegal, especially when there's video evidence. The silence that followed was deafening. David stood there, his authority crumbling, his face twisted between rage and fear. He'd been exposed, called out, challenged in front of everyone. And for the first time in 4 years, he had no comeback, no threat, no power. I'm going home to change, I said, my voice calm again. And then I'm going straight to a lawyer. And then I'm filing a formal complaint with corporate and the state labor board. And if you try to retaliate against me or anyone else in this room, that's going in the complaint too. I walked past him toward the door. He didn't try to stop me, didn't say anything, just stood there, frozen. Before I left the break room, I turned back one more time. To everyone else who's dealt with this, I said, you don't have to stay silent. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to pretend it's normal. There are people who will listen. There are ways to fight back. And you're not alone. Then I walked out of the break room, through the warehouse, past all the workers who'd heard what happened and were already starting to whisper. Out to my car, in the parking lot. My hands were shaking as I got in. My whole body was trembling, not from fear, from adrenaline, from the release of 4 years of pent-up anger and frustration and humiliation. I sat there for a moment, coffee-stained and exhausted, and I started to cry. Not sad tears, relief tears, the kind of tears that come when you finally stand up for yourself, after letting someone walk all over you for way too long. What would you have done in that moment? Let me know below. I drove home in a daze. The adrenaline was still coursing through my veins, making my hands tremble on the steering wheel. Part of me couldn't believe what I'd just done. Part of me kept replaying it in my head, analyzing every word, every moment, wondering if I'd gone too far or if I should have said more. But mostly, I felt lighter, like I'd been carrying a massive weight on my shoulders for years and had finally set it down. When I got home, I stripped off my coffee-soaked clothes and stood in the shower for a long time, letting the hot water wash away the physical remnants of what had happened. But the emotional impact remained. The sense of having crossed a line I could never uncross. The knowledge that everything was about to change. After I got dressed, I sat down at my kitchen table with my phone. My hands were steadier now. My mind was clearer. I opened my contacts and found the number for an employment lawyer I'd looked up months ago, but never called. Back when I'd first thought about filing a complaint, but talked myself out of it. Back when I'd convinced myself it wasn't worth the trouble. This time, I didn't hesitate. I made the call. The lawyer's name was Patricia Hernandez. She listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, there was a pause on the line. "Do you still have the video?" she asked. "Yes, on my phone." "Don't delete it. Email it to yourself. Back it up somewhere safe. That's evidence." "Okay. And I want you to write down everything you can remember. Every incident, every comment, every inappropriate touch. Dates, if you remember them. Witnesses, if there were any. Everything." "There were witnesses to a lot of it," I said. "Other employees. They've seen him do this to multiple women." "Good. We'll need their statements if they're willing to talk. Now, here's what's going to happen next." She explained the process. Filing a formal complaint with the EEOC, documenting everything, building a case. It would take time. It might get ugly. But she was confident we had grounds for a harassment and hostile work environment claim. "One more thing," she said before we hung up. "Don't go back to that workplace. Not until we've filed everything formally and established that you're protected from retaliation. Call in sick if you have to. Take unpaid leave. But don't give them any excuse to claim you abandoned your job. I did exactly what she said. I spent the rest of that day writing. Page after page of incidents I'd tried so hard to forget. Times David had cornered me in the supply room. Comments he'd made about my body. The way he'd touch my lower back or shoulder. The implied threats about my job security if I didn't cooperate. It was exhausting. Reliving all of it. Putting it into words. But it was also validating. Seeing it written down. Seeing the pattern. Seeing the clear, documented evidence that this wasn't in my head. This wasn't me being too sensitive. This was real. My phone kept buzzing. Text messages from coworkers. Mark 1st. Holy shit, Sarah. That was incredible. Half the warehouse is talking about it. Then Linda. You were so brave. I wish I'd said something years ago. Then Tony. David left early. Looked like he was about to have a heart attack. No one's seen him since. And then, unexpectedly, messages from people I barely knew. Other warehouse workers, women who'd transferred to different departments or different shifts to get away from David, women who'd heard what happened and wanted to share their own stories. One message in particular stood out. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Hi, Sarah. This is Jessica. I heard about what you did today. Thank you. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. If you need someone to back up your story, I'm here. I stared at that message for a long time. Jessica. The girl who'd quit rather than deal with him anymore. She was willing to come forward now. I wasn't alone. I'd never been alone. There were so many of us. So many women who'd been dealing with his behavior, suffering in silence, thinking we each had to handle it by ourselves. The next day, I went to Patricia's office with my written statement and the video. She reviewed everything carefully. This is good, she said. This is very good. With the video evidence, the multiple witnesses, and the documented pattern of behavior, we have a strong case. What happens now? Now we file. We send your formal complaint to the EEOC. We also send notice to Morrison's distribution center that you're represented by counsel and that any retaliation will be met with legal action. And then we wait. Wait for what? For them to respond. For their lawyers to call. For corporate to realize they have a serious problem on their hands. It took 3 days. 3 days before my phone rang with an unknown number. When I answered, it was a woman who identified herself as the Regional Director of Human Resources for Morrison's corporate office. Ms. Thompson, she said, her voice carefully professional. We've received your complaint. I want you to know we're taking this very seriously. Are you? I said flatly. Yes, we've already initiated an internal investigation. David Morrison has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. Administrative leave. Not fired, not terminated. Just leave. I'm sure you can understand our position, she continued. We need to conduct a thorough investigation before making any final decisions. I understand your position, I said, but I also understand that David Morrison has been doing this for years, that multiple women have quit because of him, that your HR department was informed at least once before and did nothing. So forgive me if I don't have a lot of faith in your internal investigation. There was a pause. We'd like to offer you a settlement. Return to work with a transfer to a different location, full compensation for missed wages, and a confidentiality agreement. No. No? No confidentiality agreement. No settling quietly. This needs to be public. Other women need to know they can speak up. They need to know there are consequences. Another pause. Longer this time. We'll need to discuss this with our legal team. You do that. My lawyer will be waiting for your call. Word spread fast after that. Other women from Morrison's came forward. Not just from our location, but from other warehouses in the state. Turns out David's behavior wasn't isolated. It was a pattern, and he'd been moved from location to location whenever complaints got too serious, rather than being disciplined or fired. The company tried to contain it, tried to settle individually with each woman who came forward. But we talked to each other. We coordinated. We refused to sign confidentiality agreements. We refused to let this be swept under the rug. If this felt satisfying, subscribe now. 3 months later, I was sitting in Patricia's office again, this time with a check on the desk in front of me. A settlement. Not hush money with a confidentiality clause, but actual compensation for what had happened, for the harassment, for the hostile work environment, for the emotional toll it had taken. David Morrison was fired. Not placed on leave, not transferred. Fired. And facing multiple lawsuits from other women who'd been subjected to his behavior over the years. The owner of Morrison's distribution center issued a public apology, announced new harassment training protocols, new reporting mechanisms, new accountability measures. Whether they'd actually stick to any of it remained to be seen, but at least it was something. I didn't go back to Morrison's. Even with the settlement, even with David gone, I couldn't. Too many bad memories, too much history. I needed a fresh start. But something unexpected came from all of this. The other women I'd worked with, the ones who'd witnessed what happened in that break room, they became my friends, real friends. We'd text each other regularly, meet up for coffee, check in to see how everyone was doing. Mark, Linda, and Tony still worked at Morrison's. They said things were different now. Not perfect, but different. People were more willing to speak up, more willing to call out inappropriate behavior. The culture was slowly shifting. And Jessica? She and I had lunch together a few weeks after everything settled. She'd found a new job, was doing well, was in therapy to process what had happened, but she seemed lighter, freer. "Thank you," she said to me over coffee, "for doing what I couldn't." "You would have done it too," I told her, "if someone had just shown you it was possible." That's the thing about standing up to bullies, especially ones with power over you. It's terrifying. It feels impossible. It feels like you're the only one who sees what's happening, like you're the crazy one for thinking it's not okay. But once one person speaks up, others follow. Once one person shows it's possible to fight back, the silence breaks. The power dynamic shifts, and the person who seemed untouchable suddenly isn't. I won't lie and say it was easy. There were days I second-guessed myself. Days I wondered if I'd overreacted. Days I worried about my career, about future job references, about whether standing up had ruined my professional reputation. But then I'd remember standing in that break room with coffee dripping down my shirt. I'd remember the way David had smiled, so confident that nothing would happen. I'd remember all the women who'd left quietly before me. And I'd know I made the right choice. I found a new job a month after everything settled. A better job, actually. Working in logistics for a company with a real HR department. A company where people treated each other with basic respect. Where I could come to work and just work. Without constantly looking over my shoulder. Without constantly being on guard. The first day at my new job, I sat at my desk and realized something. I wasn't tense. My shoulders weren't tight. My stomach wasn't in knots. I was just there, present, ready to do my job without fear. That's what normal is supposed to feel like. That's what you deserve from your workplace. Basic human respect. Basic human dignity. The ability to do your job without being harassed, without being touched inappropriately, without being made to feel like you should be grateful for the abuse. If there's anything I want people to take from my story, it's this. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to stay silent. You don't have to protect someone else's comfort at the expense of your own safety and dignity. Yes, standing up is scary. Yes, there might be consequences. Yes, it might make your life harder in the short term, but staying silent is harder. Living with that knot in your chest every single day is harder. Sacrificing your self-respect just to keep a job is harder. And you're not alone. That's the most important thing I learned. When I finally spoke up, I discovered there were so many others who'd been through the same thing, who were ready to support each other, who were tired of accepting the unacceptable. Change doesn't happen because companies suddenly decide to be better. Change happens because people demand it, because victims become survivors, become advocates, because someone, somewhere, finally decides they're done. I still have hard days. Days where I think about everything that happened and feel angry all over again. Angry at David for his behavior. Angry at the system that protected him for so long. Angry at myself for not speaking up sooner. But I also have proud days. Days where I remember standing up in that break room, voice shaking but steady, and refusing to be silent anymore. Days where another woman reaches out to thank me for showing her it's possible to fight back. Days where I remember that sometimes doing the right thing and doing the easy thing are not the same, and that's okay. My life is different now. Better. I sleep better. I breathe easier. I'm not constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next inappropriate comment or unwanted touch. And every time I hear about another person standing up to their harasser, another company being held accountable, another survivor refusing to stay silent, I feel hope. Hope that workplaces are getting better. Hope that the next generation won't have to deal with what my generation dealt with. Hope that speaking up is becoming easier because more of us are doing it. To anyone out there dealing with a boss like David, with a workplace that makes you feel small and scared and powerless, your story matters. Your voice matters. You matter. You deserve to be treated with respect. You deserve to feel safe at work. You deserve to be able to do your job without being harassed or degraded or made to feel like you should be grateful for abuse. And if you're ready to speak up, know that there are people who will listen, lawyers who will fight for you, advocates who will support you, other survivors who will stand with you. It's not easy, but it's possible. And sometimes, that's all the encouragement we need to take that first scary step. That day in the break room, covered in coffee, with my hands shaking and my voice rising, I took my first step. And it changed everything. Not just for me. For every woman who came forward after me. For the people still working at Morrison's who now have a voice. For everyone who saw what happened and realized they didn't have to accept the unacceptable anymore. One moment, one decision, one refusal to stay silent. That's all it takes to start changing things. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe, like the video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps these stories coming.